Part 1. It was a bright and sunny afternoon when my son, James, invited me to his wedding. He and his fiancée, Lily, had been planning the ceremony for months, and everything seemed perfect. The venue was beautiful, the guest list was long, and the excitement was palpable. As I prepared for the wedding, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. It was a big moment in James' life, and I knew it would be life-changing for both of us. James had always been a smart, ambitious young man. He had worked hard and achieved so much, but he'd always had a complicated relationship with me. Ever since he was young, there had been a distance between us. I had always been the strong, quiet type, and I was never one to show my emotions easily. I also didn't show much pride in my accomplishments, especially the family restaurant that had been passed down through generations. The family restaurant had been my pride and joy for years, but I rarely discussed it. It was something I worked hard to build and maintain, but it was also a symbol of my past. I'd built it from the ground up, pouring my heart and soul into it, but somehow I always felt that James would never fully understand the amount of work and sacrifice it had taken. On the day of his wedding, I arrived at the venue early, hoping to avoid the chaos and bustle. As I walked into the reception hall, I saw Lily, my new daughter-in-law, greeting guests with a warm smile. She was a lovely girl, elegant and graceful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I took my seat at the table, I noticed the elaborate decorations and the luxury of it all. The banquet was breathtaking, elegant floral arrangements, golden tableware, sparkling chandeliers hanging above, and guests dressed to the nines. Everything about the wedding screamed affluence and grandeur, and I couldn't help but feel a little out of place. But then, something strange happened. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me, and I knew that this was no ordinary wedding. I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. The last thing I wanted was to cause tension or create any discomfort, especially on such a special day for James. I could see Lily's nervous smile as she exchanged pleasantries with the guests, trying to be the perfect bride. But I could also sense something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. As dinner began, I noticed a few of James' friends exchanging glances. There was some hushed conversation at the other tables, and I began to feel like I was on the outside of it all. Then, as if on cue, James stood up to give his speech, and I braced myself for what was about to come. "Thank you all for being here today to celebrate with us," James began. His voice was steady, but there was something about the way he looked at the crowd that made me uneasy. He went on to thank his new wife, and the crowd clapped. But then his gaze met mine. "I want to thank my father as well," James said, his voice slightly shaky. "I'm sure you're all wondering why we are not sitting together. You see, my father is a humble man, and he doesn't like to make a fuss. But I'll just say this. He's done more for me than I could ever repay." I could feel the warmth in his words, but there was a lingering tension in the air. James continued to speak, but my mind was elsewhere. I had noticed that Lily was trying to avoid eye contact with me. Her posture was stiff, and she was acting distant. But what I didn't know was that there was something much deeper going on, something that would shake my world to its core. As the evening wore on and the speeches continued, I was suddenly interrupted by a member of the wedding party. "Mr. Martin," he said, his voice low, "I'm afraid we need you to come with us." I stood up, feeling a wave of confusion wash over me. What was happening? Had something happened with the ceremony? Was there an issue with the seating? But the look in the wedding party members' eyes told me that it was something much more serious. Is everything okay? I asked, a nervous knot forming in my stomach. He nodded, but his expression was grave. Please, follow me. It's about your son. Before I could say another word, I found myself walking towards a private area at the back of the venue. There, standing in front of me, was Lily's father, Richard, the man I had known for years. He looked at me with a serious expression and said, "I think we need to talk." It was then that I began to understand that there was more to the situation than I could ever have imagined. What was Richard about to tell me? What had James done? As the tension in the room built, I could feel my heart racing. The last thing I expected on my son's wedding day was to be confronted with something so dark and unsettling. This was only the beginning of the story, a story that would forever change my relationship with my son, my daughter-in-law, and the future I had carefully built for them. The words hit me like a tidal wave. My business, the family restaurant, the one I had worked so hard to build, the one that had been passed down for generations. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're saying James wants to take the restaurant?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the anger rising inside me. That's insane. Why would he do that? Richard leaned forward, his face serious. "I don't know, David, but he's been planning it for a while now. And Lily's been encouraging him. She sees the restaurant as an asset. She wants to cash out." I felt my blood run cold. This was not the son I had raised. James had always known how much the restaurant meant to me. It had been the heart of our family for so many years, and now his wife was convincing him to turn it into something else, something cold, something business-oriented. "But that's not all," Richard continued, his voice lowering. "James, he's been making moves behind your back. He's been trying to secure a loan, using the restaurant as collateral, and he's been telling people he's planning to buy you out." I felt like I was drowning in disbelief. My mind was reeling. James, my own son, was trying to take away the one thing that had kept our family together, that had defined everything I had worked for. And now, it wasn't just about the business. It was about control. It was about power. "I never thought he'd go this far," Richard said quietly. "But I think it's time you knew. You need to decide what you want to do about it." I sat there, stunned. The words kept echoing in my mind. "He's planning to buy you out. He's using the restaurant as collateral. He's been making moves behind your back." It felt like everything I had worked for was slipping through my fingers. "Why are you telling me all of this now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you warn me before?" Richard shifted uneasily. "I didn't know how to tell you," he admitted. "But now, with everything happening today, I think it's time you knew what was going on." I sat back, trying to process the weight of what I was hearing. My son, the boy I had raised, the one who had always looked up to me, was now trying to destroy everything I had built. I couldn't believe it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this had been building for years. And then, a part of me, the part that was still a father, wanted to believe that it wasn't too late to change things, that there was still a chance to fix it. But deep down, I knew that this was something much deeper than just a simple mistake. I had to make a choice, and it wasn't going to be easy. In the next part, we'll explore how David decides to confront his son about his actions, and what happens next. Will James' plans be exposed, or will David lose everything he's worked for? Stay tuned. Part 3. As I sat in the quiet room with Richard's words still echoing in my ears, the weight of the situation settled in. How could James, my own flesh and blood, be so driven by greed and ambition that he would try to take the one thing that I had spent my entire life building? The family restaurant was more than just a business. It was a legacy. It had been passed down through generations, each one contributing to its success. And now my son was trying to rip it away from me, all for the sake of money. Richard's revelation left me stunned. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to act. I couldn't sit back and let this happen. Not to my restaurant, not to my legacy. I had spent decades creating something special, something that represented the heart and soul of our family. And now, James wanted to destroy it. I stood up, my fists clenched, and looked at Richard. I can't just let this happen, I said, my voice firm. I need to talk to James. I need to know the truth. Richard hesitated for a moment, his face troubled. David, you have to be careful. James is in deep. He's not the same person you knew. I think he's being influenced by Lily more than you realize. She's very ambitious, and she sees the restaurant as an easy way to make money. I'm afraid that if you confront him, it could make things worse. I paused, considering Richard's words. He was right about Lily. She had always been more materialistic, always looking for ways to climb the social ladder. And James, who had once been so driven by family values, had somehow gotten caught up in her ambitions. But despite what Richard said, I couldn't just let them take everything from me without at least trying to make things right. I can't just sit here and let this happen. Richard, I said again, this time with more conviction. I've got to face James and figure out what's going on. I can't let him destroy everything we've worked for. Richard sighed, rubbing his temples as if he were exhausted. I understand, David. But promise me one thing. Be careful. This could turn ugly very quickly. I've seen the way James and Lily have been acting behind your back. If they feel threatened, they could do something you might regret. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what I could do to stop them. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. That evening, after I left Richard's office, I drove home in a daze. My mind was racing with thoughts of what had been happening behind my back. I kept replaying Richard's words in my head. James is using the restaurant as collateral, and his planning to buy you out. It didn't make sense. How could my son do this to me? Had he really sunk so low? When I arrived at home, I could feel the tension in the air. The house seemed different, as though it were just a shell of what it had once been. I knew that something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It was as if everything had changed overnight. I walked through the front door, the smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen greeting me. My wife, Margaret, was sitting at the table, looking concerned. David, what's wrong? She asked, noticing the look on my face. You seem tense. I sat down next to her, trying to collect my thoughts before I spoke. I didn't want to burden her with the full weight of what I had just learned. She had enough on her plate, especially with the restaurant being such a central part of our lives. I just spoke to Richard, I said slowly, my voice low, and I found out some things about James, about his plans. Margaret's eyes widened in surprise. What kind of plans? I took a deep breath. He's been trying to take the restaurant from me. He's been working behind my back to secure a loan, using the restaurant as collateral. He wants to buy me out. Margaret was silent for a long moment, processing the information. I could see the shock on her face. She had always been supportive of James, but this was different. Why would he do that? Margaret finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I replied, but I can't just sit back and let it happen. I've worked my whole life for this restaurant. I won't let him take it. I felt a wave of determination wash over me. I knew what I had to do. I had to confront James, face to face. I couldn't let him get away with this. He needed to understand that this wasn't just a business to me. It was a legacy, a family tradition that meant everything to me. I wasn't going to let him tear it apart. I'm going to talk to him, I said, more to myself than to Margaret. I'll fix this. Margaret nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and support. Just be careful, David. I don't want to see you get hurt. I kissed her on the forehead and stood up, my mind already made up. The battle for the family restaurant was just beginning, and I wasn't going to back down. In the next part, David prepares to confront James, but things take an unexpected turn. Will David be able to stop his son's plans, or will James take everything from him? Stay tuned to find out. Part 4. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart and a mind full of questions. The entire situation felt surreal. How could this be happening? I'd spent so many years building the restaurant into what it was today. And now, my own son wanted to take it away from me? I sat in the kitchen, staring at the cup of coffee in front of me, my mind racing. What if James was doing this because he thought I was getting old? Or because he thought I couldn't handle the pressure anymore? But I wasn't ready to give up. I wasn't ready to let go. Not of the restaurant, not of my legacy. Margaret came into the kitchen, sensing the weight on my shoulders. You're really going through with this, aren't you? She asked, softly. I looked up at her, my heart aching. I have to, Margaret. I can't just sit back and let him destroy everything we've worked for. I know, she said, taking a seat across from me. But you need to be careful. James is your son. You've always been there for him, and this is hard to process. It's not just about the restaurant. It's about family. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. But my resolve was strong. I had to do this, for myself, for the restaurant, and for our family's future. I couldn't let greed tear everything apart. I'm going to talk to him, face to face, I said, finally making up my mind. I'll tell him how I feel. Maybe he doesn't realize what he's doing. Maybe he doesn't understand what this restaurant means to me. I have to make him understand. Margaret gave me a sad smile. I know you'll do what you need to do, but just be gentle with him. He's still your son. I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. I know, but sometimes love is tough. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right. I stood up and grabbed my coat from the hook by the door. It was time to confront James. No more hiding behind closed doors or avoiding the conversation. I had to face him, no matter how difficult it would be. As I drove to James's apartment, the tension in my chest built. The road seemed longer than usual, and the car felt like a prison, trapping me in my thoughts. I replayed the conversation in my mind 100 times. What would I say to him? How would I approach him? He'd always been my son, and I love him. But this was unforgivable. When I arrived at his building, I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. I walked to the door, each step heavier than the last. This wasn't going to be easy, but I had to do it. For the restaurant, for the family, for everything I had worked for. I rang the doorbell, and after a few moments, the door opened. James stood there, looking surprised but not necessarily happy to see me. "Dad," he said, his voice a bit cold. "What's going on?" "I wasn't expecting you." "I need to talk to you, James," I said, my voice steady. "About the restaurant." His expression shifted, just slightly, but I could tell he knew exactly what I was there for. "Dad, we've talked about this before. You know what I want. I want to buy you out. I don't want to see you struggling anymore." "Struggling?" I repeated, my voice rising with emotion. "I'm not struggling, James. I've built that restaurant with my own hands. I've poured my heart and soul into it. It's not just a business to me, it's my legacy. It's our family's legacy. You can't just take that from me." James looked away, avoiding my gaze. "You're not getting any younger, Dad. And honestly, the restaurant is holding you back. You could live comfortably if you just let go of it. Let me take over. I'm doing this for you, for the family." His words hit me like a punch in the gut. He was trying to justify his actions, to make me believe that he was doing this out of some misplaced sense of care. But I knew the truth. This wasn't about caring for me. It was about greed, about control. And I wouldn't stand for it. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I've worked my entire life for that restaurant, and I'm not going to let you take it from me. I built it from the ground up, and I'm not going to just hand it over because you think it's time for me to retire. You're my son, and I love you, but this isn't about love. This is about respect. You need to understand that." James's face tightened, but he didn't say anything right away. He seemed to be weighing my words, trying to process them. But then, the mask of indifference slipped, and I saw a flicker of something else: guilt, regret, maybe even fear. "Dad, I didn't mean it like that," he said, his voice softer now. I don't know. I thought it was the best thing, but maybe I was wrong." I could see the hesitation in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, he realized what he was doing. Maybe he understood the magnitude of what he was asking of me. But I wasn't sure if it was too little, too late. "James," I said, my voice softer now, "I know you want what's best. But what's best isn't always what we think. The restaurant is my life's work. It's a part of me, and I can't just give that up. I've made my decision." James didn't argue. He just nodded, as if accepting my decision. "I understand, Dad," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." And just like that, the tension in the room seemed to lift. We were at an impasse, but it wasn't the same as before. I wasn't giving up. And James, for the first time, seemed to understand that. In the next part, David must navigate the aftermath of his conversation with James. How will their relationship change? Stay tuned to find out. Part 5. The days following my confrontation with James were filled with silence. The kind of silence that spoke louder than any argument could. The restaurant remained a point of contention between us, but neither of us seemed willing to speak about it again, not directly. Instead, we both danced around the subject, pretending everything was normal, when in reality, everything had changed. I spent the next week at the restaurant, working through the tasks that had been piling up. It was a relief to dive back into something I knew so well. The familiar clinking of dishes and the smell of freshly baked bread grounding me. I took solace in the routine, in the steady rhythm of the restaurant. It was mine, and that was all that mattered. But at home, things weren't so simple. The conversation with James had left a wound that hadn't fully healed, and the distance between us grew with each passing day. I could see him struggling, unsure of how to move forward. He had always been the type to avoid difficult conversations, to sweep things under the rug when things got tough. And yet, this wasn't something that could be ignored. It was about the future of the restaurant, about the future of our family. One afternoon, while I was organizing some paperwork in the back office, Maria came to visit. She had always been a supportive presence in my life, and I was glad she was there. She could tell something was wrong, even though I hadn't said a word. "You've been quiet lately," she said as she sat down across from me. "How are you doing?" I leaned back in my chair and let out a deep sigh. "I'm managing. But it's hard, Maria. This whole thing with James, it's tearing me up inside. I don't know how to fix it." Maria nodded, understanding. "I can see it in your eyes. You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. But you have to remember, David, you can't fix everything alone. Sometimes, people need space to figure things out. Even your son." I shook my head. "I don't know if I can give him space. Maria, this isn't just about us anymore. It's about our family's legacy. The restaurant is everything to me. I can't just sit back and let him take it from me." She leaned forward, placing a hand on mine. "David, I understand. But you can't force him to see things the way you do. It's hard. I know you've worked your whole life for this, and you don't want to let go. But James is your son. He's struggling too. He's trying to figure out his place in the world, just like you did when you were younger. Don't lose sight of what matters most, your family." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. Maria was right. In all the frustration, in all the hurt, I had lost sight of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about a restaurant. It was about the relationship I had with my son, the family bond that had always held us together. If I wasn't careful, I could lose that too. "I know you're right," I said, my voice heavy with realization. "But I don't know how to fix it. He's so determined, and I don't know if I can change his mind. He wants control. He wants the restaurant. He wants to take everything from me, and I just can't let him do that." Maria smiled gently. "It's not about control, David. It's about understanding. James doesn't understand the value of what you've built, but he will, eventually. You just need to give him time." I sighed, feeling a weight lift slightly off my shoulders. Maria's words had a way of making things feel more manageable. She was right. I couldn't change the past, but I could control how I moved forward. That night, I decided to take action. I would reach out to James. We needed to talk, and not just about the restaurant. We needed to talk about everything, our relationship, our family, our future. I didn't want to lose him. Not over a business. The next morning, I called James. It rang a few times before he finally picked up. "Dad." His voice sounded distant, hesitant. "James, I think we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "About everything." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him sigh. "I know. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know, James. I didn't mean to push you either. This whole thing, it's not just about the restaurant. It's about us, about what we mean to each other. I don't want to lose you over a business deal. I don't want that to define us." James was quiet for a moment, and then he spoke softly. "I don't want to lose you either, Dad. I was wrong. I got caught up in wanting more. I thought if I had the restaurant, I could finally prove myself. But I see now that it's not about the money or the business. It's about family." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "We'll figure it out together, James. You don't have to prove anything to me. You've always been enough. Let's rebuild our relationship piece by piece." And just like that, the storm that had been brewing between us started to calm. The tension, the fear of losing something so precious, began to dissipate. We were still father and son, and nothing could change that. Next in Part 6, David and James work together to rebuild their relationship, and they begin to heal the rift that had threatened to tear them apart. But can they truly reconcile, or will the shadow of the past continue to haunt them? Stay tuned to find out. Part 6. The days following my conversation with James were filled with mixed emotions, relief, hope, and a deep sense of vulnerability. Our relationship, once strained by misunderstandings and financial struggles, had started to heal, but I knew that there was more work to be done. Healing wasn't an instant fix. It wasn't just about agreeing to disagree. It was about rebuilding the trust we had lost over the years. James and I agreed to meet at the restaurant one afternoon, the place that had once been the cornerstone of everything in our family. We needed to sit down, have an honest conversation, and work through the mess we had gotten ourselves into. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but I knew it was a crucial step in repairing the damage we'd done. When James arrived, he looked different. Gone was the arrogance, the eagerness to rush into decisions. He looked like someone who had been through a storm, someone who had learned a hard lesson. But I also saw a spark in his eyes, a spark that reminded me of the son I had raised. We sat across from each other at the table, the familiar hum of the restaurant surrounding us. The smell of fresh bread and sizzling steaks filled the air, reminding me of the many memories tied to this place. My late wife, Margaret, had always been there with me, supporting every step of the way. I could feel her presence in the walls, in the kitchen, in every corner of the restaurant. It was hard to ignore the emotions that came rushing back. "I've been thinking a lot, Dad," James said quietly, breaking the silence. "I realize now that I was wrong. I was so caught up in the idea of having it all. I didn't stop to think about what was really important." I studied him, waiting for him to continue. The weight of his words felt significant, like a shift in perspective that had been years in the making. "I know you worked hard for everything we have," he went on, his voice tinged with regret. "And I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. I thought if I could just take over the restaurant, if I could get my hands on that kind of power, maybe I'd finally feel like I was enough, like I mattered." I felt my heart soften. "James, you've always mattered to me," I said, my voice more gentle than it had been in years. "You didn't need to prove yourself to me. You're my son." But sometimes, in our own pride, we forget what really matters. What's important? James nodded, his eyes downcast. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About family. About the restaurant. And I realize now that it's not about the business. It never was. It's about us and our legacy. What we leave behind." His words struck me deeply. This was the son I had always known. The one who cared about more than just success or money. The one who, deep down, understood the importance of family. "I never wanted to hurt you, Dad," James continued. I don't know. I got mixed up in everything. But I'm ready to fix it. I'm ready to work with you, not against you." The relief that washed over me was immense. I didn't know if everything could be fixed overnight, but I was willing to try. We both had made mistakes, but the fact that we were talking about them openly was a step in the right direction. "I'm glad to hear that, James," I said, my voice full of emotion. "It's not easy, this path we are on, but we can't go back. What matters is that we move forward, together." We both sat there in silence for a moment, taking it all in. The conversation had gone from one of tension and distrust to one of understanding and reconciliation. I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end of our journey, but it was a powerful beginning. We had both learned something about ourselves, about each other. "I think we need to be clear on where we go from here," I said, feeling the need to set boundaries and expectations. "I'm not just going to hand over the restaurant. James, it's not just about the money. It's about what this place represents. It's about our family. If you want to take part in it, then I need to see you commit. To this business and to this family." James nodded, a determination returning to his expression. "I understand, Dad. I'm not asking for control. I just want to be part of what you've built. I want to make things right." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild not only the restaurant but also our relationship. Next in Part 7, James and David begin to work together, navigating the road to healing their strained relationship. But as new challenges arise, they must face the reality of their past decisions. Will they succeed in rebuilding what they've lost? Or will old wounds continue to haunt them? Stay tuned to find out. Part 7. The next few days after our heart-to-heart conversation were surprisingly calm. James and I had come to an understanding, but the true test was yet to come. I knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to heal what had been broken over the years. It would take time, commitment, and a lot of hard work. But something inside me shifted that day. Maybe it was the way James had apologized. Or perhaps it was the sincerity in his eyes. But I finally felt like we had turned a corner. James started showing up at the restaurant more often. Something I had long wished for. He wasn't just there to sit around. He was working alongside me, learning the ropes, asking questions about the ins and outs of the business. At first, I was skeptical. Was he truly invested in this? Or was he just trying to make amends for his past mistakes? But as the days went on, I saw a change in him. He was becoming more and more involved, not just in the work, but in understanding why this restaurant was so important to me and to our family. One evening, after the dinner rush had slowed, I was in the back, cleaning up, when James walked in holding a tray of freshly baked bread. "Dad," he said, looking at me with a slight smile, "I wanted to talk to you about something." I turned to face him, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "What's up?" He placed the tray on the counter and took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about the restaurant, and I think I want to make it more than just a business. I want to make it a family legacy, a place people remember, something we can be proud of." His words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had been carrying the weight of the restaurant on my own. I had poured everything into it, but somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of what mattered. It wasn't just about running a successful business. It was about creating a place where people could come together, share memories, and feel like they were part of something bigger. "That's what I've always wanted," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But it's not just about the food, James. It's about the people. It's about family. It's about the legacy we leave behind." James nodded, his face serious. "I get it now. I didn't understand before, but I do now. I'm ready to work with you, Dad. I want to help make this restaurant even better." I looked at him, studying his face, trying to see if he was truly committed. It had been so hard to trust him after everything that had happened. But something in me told me that he meant it. The sincerity in his voice, the way he was looking at me, it all felt right. "All right," I said, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Let's make it happen. But it's going to take time. James, we are going to have to work together every step of the way, and it won't always be easy." "I'm ready," he said, his voice filled with determination. And just like that, I knew that we had taken another important step in the right direction. The road ahead would still be difficult, but I no longer felt alone in it. James was with me now, and we were going to rebuild not just the restaurant, but our relationship as father and son. Next in Part 8, as James and David work side by side to rebuild the family restaurant, unexpected challenges arise. They will face resistance from outside forces, and their bond will be tested once again. Can they truly create the legacy they both dream of? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Part 8, the final test. The weeks turned into months, and James and I found ourselves working side by side every day. The restaurant, once a symbol of division, had become a place where we found common ground. We worked late into the evenings, making small improvements here and there, revamping the menu, and welcoming guests with renewed energy and enthusiasm. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud of what we were doing together. James, who had once been distant and consumed by his own ambition, now seemed genuinely invested in not only the business, but also the values that had always been at its core: family, hard work, and community. He had learned that success wasn't just about numbers or profit margins. It was about people. It was about creating something lasting, something that would be cherished for generations. But, as much as things seemed to be improving, there was always a sense of unease lingering in the background. Deep down, I knew that our journey wasn't over. We had come so far, but the road ahead was still fraught with obstacles. I couldn't help but wonder, would we be able to keep this up? Would the restaurant and our bond truly survive the test of time? One evening, as we were closing up the restaurant, I sat down at one of the tables, taking a moment to reflect. The restaurant was quiet now, the last few customers having left for the night. The flickering lights above cast soft shadows on the walls, and the familiar smell of garlic and fresh bread lingered in the air. James walked over, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Dad, you okay?" I looked up at him, a slight smile on my face. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About everything we've been through," I said, my voice quiet. "About how much has changed. How much I've changed. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect to get my son back, to get my family back." James sat down across from me, his face thoughtful. "I didn't expect it either," he admitted. "I've learned a lot these past few months. I was so focused on making money, on trying to prove myself, that I missed what really mattered. You've taught me a lot, Dad." I felt a lump in my throat. I had spent so many years worrying about our relationship, about the rift between us. And now, in this quiet moment, it felt like we had finally found our way back to each other. But there was still one final hurdle to face. Just as I was about to speak, the door to the restaurant opened, and in walked Lily, my daughter-in-law. She looked around the restaurant, her face unreadable. I hadn't seen her much since everything had unfolded between James and me, and honestly, I wasn't sure how to feel about her. The tension was still there, but I was determined to face it. "Lily," I said, standing up, "we need to talk." She nodded, her eyes scanning the room, before she spoke. "I've been meaning to talk to you. David, I know things haven't been easy between us, but I think it's time we finally clear the air." I exchanged a look with James, who gave me a small nod, as if telling me to go ahead. I wasn't sure where this conversation would lead, but it was time to face the truth, no matter how difficult it was. "Sit down," I said, motioning to the chairs at the table. "Let's talk." As we all sat down, there was a moment of silence. Lily seemed tense, as though she was waiting for me to speak first. I didn't want to attack her, but I also knew I had to address the way she had manipulated the situation in the past. "Lily," I began, my voice calm but firm, "I know things have been difficult between us. You were pushing James to take over the restaurant, and that hurt me. But I'm willing to listen. I want to understand where you're coming from." She took a deep breath, looking down at her hands before looking up at me. "I didn't mean to hurt you, David. I honestly thought that if James took over the restaurant, he'd be successful. I thought it was the best thing for him, for both of us. But I see now that I made a mistake. I see now that it's not just about the money or the business. It's about family." James looked at her, his expression softening. "I didn't understand that either, Lily. I got caught up in the wrong things. But I'm trying to make it right. I'm trying to fix things." Lily nodded slowly, her face full of remorse. "I know. And I'm sorry. I see now that the restaurant, and what it represents, means so much more than I thought. I see how hard you've worked, David, and how much this means to you. I was wrong." The air in the room seemed to shift as the tension started to dissolve. There was still a long way to go, but in that moment, it felt like we had finally reached a place of understanding. James and Lily, my family, were willing to work with me, not against me. We could rebuild, not just the restaurant, but everything that had been fractured. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, my voice sincere. "We've all made mistakes, but it's never too late to make things right. And we'll do this together, as a family." Lily smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. I hope so, David. I really do. The end. Thank you for following this journey with us. Stay tuned for more stories of redemption, family, and healing. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for future updates.